How's it, guys? And welcome to another video of Jun Ismail fishing. Today we're going to be discussing sinkers. So I'm going to start with the first one of my discussion today, and that's going to be on what is sinkers. So sinker is basically a weight that we use in fishing, or something like an anchor that is made up of lead in most cases, and it's a necessity in fishing. So we attach this to our trace and we use this to cast our bait out, and in fact it holds as an anchor towards the ocean current, so our bait doesn't really wash out all the time. So angling as the technical sport it is, requires different kinds of sinkers and different shapes of sinkers and stuff. So yeah, today we're going to be discussing all about that. So basically, what exactly is a sinker? Is basically an anchor that we use to keep our bait in deeper water, and helps us to our bait not to wash out. So yeah, guys, that is basically what a sinker is, and we're going to be discussing different things today and aspects on sinkers. So yeah, our second one is the different types of sinkers we have. There are various different types of sinkers we have, and they're made up of different shapes, and they consist of different weights. In most cases they are weighed in ounces. So the different shapes of sinkers we have, they're used for different kinds of things. So the one of the most common sinkers we have is the grapnel sinker, that has a wire to it that helps it anchor when there's quite a drift or quite a high of a surge. It helps us to anchor our bait more. Yeah, so guys, it's very important to choose the correct sinker when you are using it to target different species. So targeting like edibles and smaller fish, there's no use using a very heavy sinker. Sometimes having a lighter sinker, having that movement, gets you that extra bite. So yeah, with regards to different types of sinkers, it's important to use a sinker that suits you and suits the type of fish that you're targeting, and also use the right sinker for the type of sea that there is. What I mean here is, like, if there's a calm sea, there's no need to use an extra heavy sinker. So remember, if you keep your bait moving in to a certain extent, you're gonna find that bite faster. Our third topic that we're gonna discuss today is using the correct sinker to suit your rod. When we purchase rods, we find that these rods are made for certain amount of ounces. For example, the rod I use is a 8 to 10 ounce rod. So it's important to use a correct sinker that matches that rod. So guys, please take into consideration that that ounce is including your bait. So if it's 8 to 10 ounce, I personally like to use a 7 ounce, and because I use a big bait, so that ranges in between that 8 to 10 ounce. So 7 ounce with a big bait, yeah, it's perfect. So if you use a too heavy sinker for a rod is only made up of carbon. So if you cast it out, it's too heavy, that's going to snap the tip, and it will be your fault. So it's important to use the correct weighting of sinker to the rod that you use. So you need to observe how many ounces your rod can take and use the sinker accordingly. So yeah, make sure if you're using a bigger bait, make sure your sinker matches up or it's slightly lighter. The fourth thing we're going to discuss today is your sinker line. It's important that when you're casting, we use a high impact of cast. So the sinker is attached to your trace, and if you cast to thin nylon, it snaps off based on the power that you put into your cast. So it's important to use a sinker line that is matching the weight of your sinker and also your action of casting. I preferably like to use slightly lighter line when I'm using my sinker, because you hook a fish and it goes into the rock and the sinker can bust off, it's fine as long as the fish is there. But if you use like a too thick nylon to your sinker line, if that gets stuck onto a rock, the fish will be on, the sinker can't come out, you lose both. So very important, make sure you have a sinker line that matches your trace, so it must be balanced off. Our fourth topic that we're going to discuss today is our sinker that we're using for the type of fishing we do. So everybody likes to do different aspects of angling. Some guys like to do throw big baits for sharks, non-edible. Some guys like to use fish for edible. Some guys like super light tackle. Some guys use sliding, and there's extra heavy sliding. So it matters on what sinker you use for the type of fishing you're targeting. So yeah, guys, if you're doing sliding, which not many guys use nowadays, but for sliding, if you're using, you are most likely going to use a grapnel sinker. So a grapnel sinker, as I explained earlier, is a sinker that has wires out, so you cast it out and it anchors in it so it doesn't move. It's important when you're sliding bait that your sinker is anchored. You don't have that moving around. If it moves around, it becomes a fruitless experience, because your sinker gets washed up and your bait can't go out. So it's important to use a grapnel sinker when sliding. So remember also, with grapnel you get different thickness of wire. So you get the thin gauge wire and the thick gauge wire. So if you are casting baits, sea is not that rough, you can use a thin gauge wire that it helps you keep your bait intact. It doesn't really move around that much. But if you're using a very thick gauge that anchors your bait, sometimes it's not really good when you're casting a bait out, because a fish picks up that bait and it feels resistance on the sinker when it's buried in and gets disturbed, and can lose a fish. So you can decide which you're going to use, a thin gauge or a thick gauge. But yeah, I'm going to show you pictures later on in this video regarding wood sinkers we use, what demonstrations of pictures. So if just the sea is very rough, there's waves are crashing, and you have high drift, high ocean currents, strong ocean currents, you can use a thicker wire for your grapnel. You can bend the wires a bit, open it up so it locks into the sand better. But yeah, it's a bit harder to reel in, easier to get stuck, because as you're reeling in, the wires can get stuck onto the rocks. But if you need to really fish into a big sea, those thick wires grapnel help you a lot. And yeah, don't use a thick wire quite often in a flat sea, because it can spook the fish, as I said earlier on. If it gets fishing for flatfish also, it's not that good to use a very thick wire grapnel. Those flatfish in fact bring its whole body onto the bait, and once they get pricked by these wires of the grapnel, they move off. So sometimes you might feel a bite, it feels a sinker, and it just drops a bait. So yeah, these fish are sensitive also, they are animals. Yeah, when using grapnel sinkers, if you wish to see, the grapnel goes into the sinker, it folds into the sinker, but sometimes it doesn't, it moves off down. So you may use a cable tie, you can use some cotton, tie it up, and it gives it some extra stability to stay on. Yeah guys, the sixth topic we're going to talk about today is the using sinkers for getting extra distance in casting. So a shape of your sinker is very very important when you wish to get that extra distance. So the more aerodynamically shaped your sinker is, the more distance it's gonna get. You're going to cast further, because something shaped into like a bullet, it goes, cuts into the air easier, get more distance. But I personally prefer a cone sinker when casting far. Like, different types of cone sinkers and how it's shaped, but the ones that are aerodynamically shaped with your bait. It gives you that extra distance, and yeah, it gets your bite faster also, because the way it's shaped, it doesn't really affect the fish. So you find nowadays that with the introduction of dangle fishing, you find that there's a clip on top of the sinker. You find the sinker, a wire, there's a clip, and there's a swivel. Swivel gets attached to your sinker line, and that clip gets attached to your dangle. So the bait goes onto the dangle, it gets attached to the sinker clip, and it goes all as one mass. Whereas if you don't clip it together, it goes as two mass. You don't it goes one, sinker goes one side, the bait goes another side. Doesn't go as much far as you want. But if you got it as one mass, it goes as one, you get a lot more distance with a sinker attached to the dangle. So yeah, guys, the cone sinkers are shaped different. You get different types of cone sinkers. You get cone shaped sinkers that are pointed in the bottom, and you get cone shaped sinkers that are flat in the bottom. I personally like to use the flat one because I found that the longer, more pointed cone sinkers tend to move more because they are put thinner and more aerodynamic. You guess you get more distance, but you also, okay, when you're fishing deep water points and stuff, it moves around much faster. So I like the flat one, which is more impact. It's more bulky and keeps your bait in one place without having to use a grappler. So yeah, but also with regards to the thinner, more pointed cone shaped sinker, you get extra distance, but the sinker tends to break faster because it's thin and longer. When it's banged against the rocks, there is a weaker point because the sinker goes from a thick version to a thinner version. So once those bottom part hits the rock, it can break off. So yeah, guys, if you're using those pointed cone sinkers, you can use it more onto the open beach, and that will help you. So yeah, guys, the seventh point we're gonna talk about is how many sinkers do you actually carry when you go fishing? And this can be a tricky question, but I'm just gonna use what works for me and explain to you guys, because you can't really carry 20-30 sinkers the whole time. It's too heavy, because especially when you walk into places that are far away, it's heavy on your back and sometimes really unnecessary. But you go to the beach, sometimes you can lose one sinker, sometimes you may not lose any sinkers, sometimes you may lose all your sinkers. And without a sinker, you can't really fish. So you need to be able to vary. The number that I like to carry when I'm fishing into reefs or rocky areas, where you sometimes lose sinkers, but there's chances that you're gonna lose more likely than usual. I like to carry around 10 sinkers when I'm fishing into reef areas. Sometimes you may lose a fish, two fish, sinker goes, cut another sinker. So yeah, guys, keep 10 when you're fishing those rocky areas. But in a place when you're fishing open beach on a shorter trip, I personally like to keep around probably 6 to 7 sinkers on a trip. Sometimes you hook a shark, they bite your hook, sinker trace line off. You can get stuck, you can lose a busted trace. So yeah, guys, you can keep around 6-7 sinkers in a bag on a usual trip. There's no issue with that. So yeah, the last point we're going to talk about is safety when using sinkers in fishing. So in fact, this is quite a dangerous part of fishing, where some guys who really don't take cognizance of the next angler and just pull the sinkers and can actually fly out the water and hit you. I've had a friend of mine who had hit to the sinker, and eventually he got cut on his forehead and he had to go for stitches. It was a bloody affair. Yeah, guys, so when you're reeling a sinker, make sure you have it under control. If you pull and it comes to you, it can hurt you, it can lodge into your eye, you can lose up your eyesight, you can get concussed, you can hurt the next guy, you've got to have control of it. So guys, when you're fishing with sinkers, make sure that you have control of it, you don't abuse it, you keep it under control. and make sure that you don't just pull it. Sometimes if you're pulling it, it can hit you also. You can lose a tooth. It can be very, very dangerous. So guys, this is what our discussion today is on sinkers. And the next part of this video, I'm going to show you which sinkers I use. These are just some of my old sinkers that I've had. Yeah guys, so this is what's it all about. These are some of the sinkers that I use, and I'm going to go through each one with it as to where we use it. So this is the sinker that I use in a very, very rough sea. And if I'm fishing a really deep point and slide a massive bait, if I'm fishing up the Transkei points or one of the deep water points, this is a 8 or 9 ounce sinker with it has a thick wire coming out. If you cast this out and you're casting, then you're sliding a big bait like a tuna head or a big bunny, yeah guys, this stays intact. You don't get you don't move at all. But this is not something that you use on in shallow water. So this is just one of my sinkers I use when I'm fishing for really big sharks and stuff. The next one we have here is a grapnel sinker. This also is a thick gauge wire. It's a 7 ounce. I'm throwing baits out into conditions that are not really calm. Sea is a bit choppy, it's rough. I use this, so there's quite a bit of drift. This helps with the thick gauge. Not my favorite sinker, but I do use it when sea is rough. The next one I use for this is a thin gauge. It's a thin gauge wire for when I'm sliding bait. So if I'm fishing for like cob or garrick or something where I don't have to cast very far, just get it just over the shore dump, and slide a bait out right in front, fishing for edibles and stuff. This works for me. So yeah, this is the thin gauge wire, guys. The next one is the best sinker I've used for casting far. So this is a cone shape grapnel sinker, very thin wire. That's how I wanted it that way. Yeah, this doesn't have a clip, so you're gonna have to add your clip in. This here works very well when you're on a cast far. See, it's flat, open beach. You're gonna get a small bait into the back line. Just flies to the air, guys. Very good sinker for casting far. The next one is a sinker called a weed eater. There's also for reef fishing. If you this in fact those green things coming out of the sinker help you not to get stuck. So in fact, when it goes into the rock, before the lead actually hits the rock, then this plastic wire is coming out, helps it to prevent the sinker from getting stuck. So yeah, it helps a lot. It's very good for reef fishing. And yeah, don't have to clip a bait or anything. This works well fishing into rocky areas. The second last sinker is a teardrop sinker, as you can see, in bad condition. Sorry about that, guys. I haven't used this in many years, but it's good for distance. Also, the way it's shaped, uh, it's good for edibles. Very good for shad and cob and stuff, fishing, moving, working water. Keeps your bait moving around, and that movement actually gets you a better bite. The last one is my personal best sinker. 99% of the time I use the sinker. It's a cone sinker. As you can see, it has a swivel and it got a clip to it where I put my dangle on, and it's cone shape. My best sinker that I use all the time. Keeps the bait intact, throws beautifully, and yeah guys, this is just a wonderful sinker. So guys, this is a video on sinkers. I tried to cover as much as I could. Hope this video helps you guys. Yeah, thank you for all the support. We've reached 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. These videos have reached around South Africa and other countries. And yeah guys, if you have any questions on this video, please feel free to comment. I'll respond to you. Let me know what you think. I'm on a break now, so I can produce more content for you guys. I'm looking forward to talking on more topics that will be relevant to you in developing yourself in the sport. Thank you so much for, and all the best in the summer fishing.